This video is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. What's up, guys? We are here for the UFC on ABC, Cory Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov card, which is a really good one. Like, a lot of great fights, good prospects, low-key better than some of the pay-per-view cards. That's how stacked this is. 13 total fights, and the card is going to start about 7 hours before the usual time. So 3 p.m. Eastern time is when the main card starts, and 12 p.m. Eastern time is when the prelims start. There were 4 canceled fights. Vicente Luque versus Nick Diaz was supposed to be on this, but Nick Diaz has some kind of travel issue. Bro ain't coming to the Middle East because he couldn't blaze up. Abdul Karim Al-Salwadi pulled down with an injury against Guram Kutateladze. Now Guram has a replacement opponent. Azamat and CJ Figueiredo both pulled out of their fight, and also Javid Pajarat versus Chris Gutierrez was also pulled off this card as well. So 4 fights canceled on the event, but still incredibly stacked, from Cory versus Umar, which might be a #1 contender fight. Shara Magomedov is back after fighting like a month ago. Like, this guy's very active. He can only fight really in the Middle East, so we expect him to be active whenever they come back over there. And he's going up against Michal, which is an amazing fight. Good stuff of a competition for Shara Bullet. Vera versus Deiveson Figueiredo, amazing bantamweight fight. Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chiesa. Come on, Tony. Please, Tony, don't make it 8 in a row. Yoel Alvarez is back. He's going up against Elvis Brenner. That's a great fight. The GOAT, Shamil Gaziev. No way, man. He's going up against Dontale. Guram Kutateladze versus Jordan Vucenic is one of the better fights on the entire card. It's low-key, under the radar. If I were to have a fight that was the dark horse of the card, it's that fight. Viktoriia Dudokova, very good fighter for the strawweight division. And those are the great fights on the card, right? The other ones are whatever. But I would have to say that the prospect of the entire card is probably Jordan, I don't know how to say his last name, Vucenic. He's 28 years old, on a hot streak, coming from Cage Warriors, great finisher, and I think in the lightweight division, he might go pretty far, maybe in the top 15, but he has a very tough opponent for his debut. Going up against Guram is crazy, man. But if he does beat Guram, he's not too far away from the top 15. The stake of the night, the fighter that's in hot waters, is Denis Tiuliulin. He's 11-9 professionally on a 3-fight loss streak, and if he loses to Sedriques Dumas, Tiuliulin might get cut. The fighter of the night is probably Cory Sandhagen. Experienced guy, veteran, fought some of the best bantamweights in the world. If he wins, he gets a title shot. And according to him, he said that the UFC wants him to fight for the title. So it's going to be quite interesting. All eyes are going to be on that main event. The banger of the night, the most explosive, fun fight on the card, I think, is that Guram versus Jordan fight. Just straight up fireworks. Guram striking. Jordan's well-rounded skill set, but always going for the finish. Cannot wait for that, man. And I would say the fight of the night, the most technical, overall best fight, is the main event. Cory Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. They are by far the most technical guys on the entire card, and there is a lot to prove for Umar. Although he is undefeated, he hasn't really fought the best guys yet. But with that, let's go right to our first fight. Sedriques Dumas versus Denis Tiuliulin. Dumas is 28 years old, standing at 6'2" with a 79-inch reach, 9-2 professionally, and is 2-2 in the UFC. Lost his last fight to Ruzaboyev by a knockout in the first round. Denis Tiuliulin is 36 years old, standing at 6'1" with a 77-inch reach, 11-9 professionally, and on a 3-fight loss streak. All of them by finish in the first and second rounds. And in the UFC, he's 1-4. So Dumas is going to be the longer guy. He has Expector Gadget arms, jabbing you from across the cage. And Denis Tiuliulin has very little defense. He doesn't really move his head much, whether he's offensive, defensive. His head is there to be hit, and I think Sedriques Dumas is going to be able to land a lot of big shots if he's more aggressive, because there are times where Dumas isn't really pressing when he can be. Tiuliulin, though, is aggressive at times. He will go after his opponent throwing hooks. Now, they say that Dumas has a 2-inch reach advantage. I don't believe that, man. His reach has to be longer than 79 inches. But I'm going to go Dumas at the end of the day. I just don't like Tiuliulin's defense. He's much older. His aggressiveness can work for him in making it more competitive. But I see Dumas moving away with the jab, catching Tiuliulin constantly throughout the fight, and eventually winning it on a decision. And then we go to Jai Herbert versus Rolando Bedoya in the lightweight division. Jai Herbert is 36 years old, standing at 6'1" with a 77-inch reach, sounding a lot like those two middleweights we just talked about. He's like the same dimensions as them. 12-5-1 professionally, and he's 2-4 in his last 6 fights. Rolando Bedoya is 27 years old, 9 years younger, 5'11" with a 75-inch reach, 14-3 professionally, and currently on a 2-fight loss streak. Has yet to win in the UFC. He almost beat Chaos Williams, right? Very close fight. After I lost to Song Kinan. But I like Jai Herbert in this fight, even though he is older, and even though his record isn't isn't too great recently. The guy's way more dynamic in the stand-up, I believe. He's long and tall, fights good from that range. And Bedoya, he is aggressive with his hands, but he throws a lot of slapping punches, right? He doesn't turn his hooks in and overhands. He's not using much of his shoulders or turning the elbows over to get around for a proper hook. But he's got decent kicks, good leg kicks, body kicks. It's going to be tough to land head kicks on someone like Jai Herbert, who fights so long and tall like that. But I could see Jai Herbert landing head kicks on Bedoya. Not only that, again, the way more dynamic hands, I believe. He is a bit more powerful. The speed might go to Bedoya, but I think the range and the timing is going to go to Herbert. So I'm going to go Jai Herbert in this fight by a decision. And then we go to Viktoriia Dudokova versus Sam Hughes in the strawweight division. Dudokova is 25 years old, 5'5", 67-inch reach, 8-0 professionally, undefeated, and has currently won both of her UFC fights. She had 2. Sam Hughes is 32 years old, 5'5", 64.5-inch reach, with an 8-6 professional record, 3-2 in her last 5 fights. I have to go with Viktoriia Dudokova. She's better in most areas of the game, way faster, more athletic, not really a high-level fight, especially against someone like Hughes. Hughes has a decent jab she can work with, throws it from long range, and it's probably the snappiest punch she has. Every other punch she throws is not really that snappy, to be honest. Dudokova doesn't have great head movement, though. She will take shots in exchange with you, but I think she is a bit faster, a little bit more dynamic, whereas Sam Hughes, she moves around, but her resetting is just atrocious to watch. But the other thing is, both fighters don't have like the greatest takedown defense. I mean, I saw Jacqueline Emery take down Sam Hughes with like the weakest takedown ever. It's crazy. But I'm gonna go Dudokova by a decision. So from the lower level fights, we get to an actual banger. Guram Kutateladze versus Jordan Vucenic. Guram is 32 years old, 5'11", with a 72-inch reach, 12-4 professionally, on a 2-loss streak. His last win back in 2020 when he beat Mateusz Gamrot. Crazy how inactive this guy has been with so many injuries that he had to fight through. Jordan is 28 years old, 5'9", 72-inch reach, 13-2 professionally, on a 4-fight win streak. All finishes by submission, and man is that guy inked up. He's putting so many tattoos on himself, he's turning into a shadow. So I think Guram is the better striker of the two, and Jordan is the better grappler. Both guys are good kickers, but Guram's hands are way better than Jordan's in my opinion. But the only thing is, Guram is so inactive, I don't know if he's going to be rusty. He hasn't fought in a year, and before that didn't fight in a year, and before that didn't fight in 2 years. 3 fights in the last 4 years is crazy, and he's only getting older, man. He's not young. Whereas Jordan clocked in 3 fights in a year, so he's going to have better momentum, he's going to have more confidence than Guram, but I think technically Guram should have the advantage in the stand-up. He should be able to block the kicks, check the leg kicks, and land his own afterward, fight off the jab very well. The only thing about Jordan though is the guy has excellent footwork, like really smooth movements, taking off angles very well, constantly switching stances, which is going to throw off a bit of the power kicks and punches from Guram, and also set up better takedowns for himself if Guram gets way too aggressive. Guram's takedown defense is getting a lot better. Of course, training with Hamza Chimaev is definitely helping him, and he's a very big guy for the weight class, but I don't know if it's enough to stop the takedowns of Jordan. If Jordan gets it to the ground, he's going to try to get the back, he's going to try to get his neck at every opportunity. Man, it's a tough fight to call. If Guram was more active, I would definitely pick him to win this fight. Stop the takedowns, I'll strike him. And he went up against a guy like Mateusz Gamrot before, who's a very good grappler, and beat that guy while also getting taken down over and over again in that fight. Still was able to win. And we might see something quite similar here against Jordan, but the inactivity is the main thing that gets in the way of me picking Guram. But we get over that, so I'm going to go with Guram Kutateladze to win this fight by a decision. Very close fight, can go either way, but Guram is a massive favorite. He's a minus 250. I don't agree with that. I think this fight's almost a pick'em. Maybe they just don't know how good Jordan is, or maybe Guram is just that much better. We're going to find out, but I am going with Guram to win the fight. And then we go to the greatest fighter of all time, the best cardio you've ever seen, the lungs of Michael Phelps, Shamil Gaziev, the king of blobs, versus Dontale. I'm going to go Shamil Gaziev. He's more consistent, whether that mean him being aggressive with his hands and putting up against the cage and punching you over and over again until you fall, or him gassing out within like 2 or 3 rounds. It's consistent with Shamil Gaziev. But I think the main way that Shamil is going to win the fight is if he uses his grappling here. Tries to take down Dontale and submit him. I mean, Cyril Gane took this guy down 3 times and submitted him with a heel hook, which is crazy. If he can do it, I'm pretty sure Shamil Gaziev should be able to use his grappling to win the fight as well. So I'm going with Shamil Gaziev in the fight. Then we go to Mohammad Yahya versus Kaue Fernandes. Mohammad Yahya is 30 years old, 5'9", 73-inch reach, 12-4 professionally. Lost his last fight to Trevor Peek, but before that was on a 5-fight win streak. This is now going to be his second UFC fight. Fernandes is 29 years old, 5'9", with a 73-inch reach, 8-2 professionally, and is 2-2 in his last 4 fights. This is also his second UFC fight as well, after losing to Mark Giacchesi. I'm going to go with Fernandes in this fight. He has better fundamentals, decent kicks. He fights from an outside range a bit, but so does Yahya. Yahya is just lacking a lot of the fundamentals. Like, he's got flying knees, his kicks come from weird angles and stuff, but he's not as snappy as Fernandes is. And I think the way Yahya fights, the distance that he fights at, is going to help Fernandes in landing some of those shots, I think. And also, I think Fernandes might be better in the close range as well. So I'm going to go with Fernandes by a decision. And then we go to Alonzo Menifield versus Azamat Murzakanov. Now we're getting into the ranked fighters, both top 15 in the light heavyweight division. Alonzo Menifield is 36 years old, 6 feet tall, with a 76-inch reach, 15-4-1 professionally, coming off one loss against Carlos Ulberg, who got getting knocked out in 12 seconds. But before that was on a pretty good streak, other than the Jimmy Crute majority draw. Azamat Murzakanov is 35 years old, 5'10", which is really short for light heavyweight, with a 71.5-inch reach, 13-0 professionally, undefeated, and won his 3 UFC fights, 2 of them by finish, but his last one against Dustin Jacoby by a decision. And the crazy thing about Azamat is he has scored a knockdown in every single one of his UFC fights so far, and even his Contender Series fight as well. The guy's quite powerful, but so is Alonzo Menifield. But the thing is, where both guys also have a wrestling game, I think Azamat might be a little bit better in that area. He doesn't remind me of like a Khabib or an Islam when it comes to his grappling, but he does have it. Much more of a striker than he is a grappler. And Alonzo Menifield has, I think, lower fight IQ than Azamat. He's way more reckless. He's a risk taker, whereas Azamat fights in a regular kind of style, regular kind of rhythm. It doesn't really deter away from that. But I do think that his skills overall in the stand-up and on the ground are a bit better than Menifield's. The only thing is, Menifield is bigger. That's the one big thing going for him, I think. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Azamat Murzakanov to win this fight by a second round TKO. And then we go to Yoel Alvarez versus Elvis Brenner. In the lightweight division, I'm still surprised Alvarez can make the weight class. The guy's enormous for it. I mean, 6'3", 77-inch reach, big build too. Like, this guy's not small at all. 31 years old, 20-3 professionally, and is 5-1 in his last 6 fights. Just came off a win against Mark Giacchesi a year ago, over a year ago actually. Very inactive fighter. He fought once in 2022, once in 2023, and he might only have one fight in 2024. By the looks of it. But I'm glad to see the loss to Arman Tsarukyan didn't deter him away from any kind of momentum or confidence that he should have. I mean, the guy's good. His win against Thiago Moises was excellent. But Elvis Brenner is younger, 26 years old, 5'10", 72-inch reach, 16-4 professionally, and is also 5-1 in his last 6 fights. Lost to Uralbai in his last one. But he did beat Guram Kutateladze in the striking, which was super impressive. The guy is incredibly tough and durable. Or at least he did show that in the Guram fight. Took a tremendous amount of damage and was able to eventually walk down Guram into an exhausting fight and eventually finish him off. But he got dropped by Uralbai, who showed to be just way more powerful, man, and way stronger, better on the ground. Brenner is an amazing submission artist, like very, very dangerous on the ground, but against someone like Uralbai, it was quite tough. But he should be able to contest with Alvarez on the ground a bit, who's not that sort of wrestler. He's a submission artist himself. In fact, if you add all of their submissions together, it's 28. 28 submissions between them. Almost all of their wins together are by submission. Because of Alvarez's length and the different kind of submissions he's very crafty with, I think he has an advantage there. Right? He's got a great Darce choke, triangle choke, guillotine, arm bar, just whatever it is. This guy is very efficient at it. I don't expect him to win by a submission, but he is, I think, better in the area. Where I believe the biggest difference is going to be is in the stand-up. I think Brenner is a more powerful striker. I think he's a little bit more capable there. Alvarez's defense isn't really that great, and I do think Brenner should be able to land some overhands on the taller Alvarez and eventually put him down and finish him with ground and pound. So I'm going to go with Elvis Brenner here by a 3rd round TKO. And a big reason as to why I'm going with Brenner is the fact that Alvarez has been so inactive. And then we go to Mackenzie Dern versus Lupita Godinez in the strawweight division. Mackenzie Dern is 31 years old, 5'4", 63-inch reach, 13-5 professionally, 2-4 in her last 6 fights, losing to the best fighters in the strawweight division from Amanda Lemos, Jessica Andrade, Yan Xiaonan, and Marina Rodriguez. And she hasn't quite looked the same since she beat Nina Nunes back in like 2021. She fought way more intelligent in that fight than any of her fights afterward. I don't know what is going on with her trying to box and not just box, brawl with everybody, and not advance her wrestling skills whatsoever. Going for the head and arm throw and stuff like that. Crazy. Lupita Godinez, though, is 30 years old, 5'2" with a 61-inch reach, 12-4 professionally, is 4-1 in her last 5 fights. I'm gonna go with Godinez. Dern's grappling, Dern's wrestling is just not that great. She doesn't have good takedowns. She's way too wild in the stand-up. Godinez is better there. She's more composed. That's pretty much it. I think she should just expect the takedowns whenever they come and expect wild punches from Dern. Mackenzie Dern did say that she's looking to be a champion now, so she's not going to brawl with her opponents anymore. So I'm expecting her to focus more on her wrestling, I guess. But until I see her actually use her wrestling effectively, I don't believe she has it. So I'm going to go with Lupita Godinez by a decision. And then we go to Shara Magomedov versus Michal Alexiachuk in the middleweight division. Shara Magomedov is super active, man. He just fought in June of this year, knocking out Johnny Walker's brother, or it looks like he would be his brother, Antonio Tricoli, or at least he has the same defense as Johnny Walker. And the same chin, too. Shara Magomedov just knocked that guy out in the 3rd round, but it took him very long to do so. Tricoli showed very low fight IQ. I think he should have done much better if he actually was consistent. But even still, he was open to the shots all fight, and it took a while for Shara to actually land them on him. But Shara Magomedov is 30 years old, 6'2", 73-inch reach, 13-0 professionally, undefeated. Most of his wins coming by knockout. And Michal Alexiachuk is 29 years old, 6 feet tall with a 74-inch reach, 19-8-1 professionally, and is 1-3 in his last 4 fights. Lost all 3 of those fights by a submission. He doesn't have to worry about that against Shara Magomedov because this guy cannot wrestle or grapple. And just like Shara, most of his wins are by knockout as well. We're going to see a striking match most likely between these two, unless the more experienced veteran here in Alexiachuk uses a bit of his grappling to win the fight, right? Take the path of least resistance against Shara. But even in the stand-up, I think Alexiachuk can really give a fight here to Magomedov. Just clean boxing, keep the basics going, you know, don't throw anything too crazy out there. The crazier and wilder the fight gets, the more it's going to favor Magomedov, because you open yourself up for his counter punches, and Magomedov's style is a bit more flashy. So I think Magomedov is a bit faster than Michal. He's going to be moving around a lot and looking for counter punches, big kicks, very sneaky question mark kicks and stuff that fly up from weird angles. But Alexiachuk is probably going to put the pressure on Magomedov, similar to how he put the pressure on Kevin Holland. And in that southpaw stance, that left hand's going to open up for himself. And if Tricoli can land those big right hands on Magomedov, I think Michal should be able to land his power hand as well, or his right hook as well. He's got a decent lead right hook, but the left hand is his main punch. The only issue with that is he will walk into some of the right hands of Magomedov. But not only that, Magomedov will do things like back away by switching stances to create more space between him and his opponent, and that causes the opponent to walk into a question mark kick from Magomedov. Those kind of setups are very, very tricky just off of his footwork alone, right? And that's probably the biggest issue that Alexiachuk is going to fall into, the setups for the kicks of Magomedov. Now, I do think the fight could be very competitive. Magomedov is like a minus 245 favorite, which is crazy. I think it should be a lot closer than that. But I am going to pick Shara Magomedov to win the fight by a 3rd round TKO. I think eventually that kick is going to land on Alexiachuk to get finished by ground and pound later. And these odds are quite crazy, man, especially when we get into the featured fights, like Cory Sandhagen being a plus 250 underdog. And the best place to capitalize on that is mybookie.ag. How is Cory Sandhagen that big of an underdog? I just don't understand that. Well, the lines are there as it is, and they're probably going to change the closer we get to the fight. So it's best to capitalize on that now than later if you want to go with Cory Sandhagen. As you can see, Marlon Vera is a plus 122 underdog against the minus 149 Deiveson Figueiredo. Tony Ferguson is the biggest underdog in the entire card, plus 440 against the minus 649 Michael Chiesa. Mackenzie Dern's a slight favorite, minus 125 against the plus 102 Lupita Godinez. Shara Magomedov, minus 236 against the plus 188 Michal Alexiachuk. Again, I believe it should be a lot closer. Yoel Alvarez is the big favorite here, minus 193 against the plus 155 Elvis Brenner. Very interesting why they have the inactive Yoel Alvarez as a pretty sizable favor going into that. I don't like how much he doesn't fight. That's the main thing. Alonzo Menafield, the plus 168 underdog against the minus 210 Azamat Murzakanov. Makes sense. Well, I did not expect Mohammad Yahya to be that big of an underdog. Plus 290 against the minus 391 Fernandes. I do see Fernandes winning the fight, but that's kind of crazy. Shamil Gaziev, minus 236 favorite against the plus 188 Dontale. Makes sense. Guram Kutateladze, the minus 240 favorite against the plus 190 Jordan Vucenic. I expected them to make Guram the favorite, but I'm kind of surprised they made him that big. I can see it. I can understand that. Should be very interesting. Viktoriia Dudokova, the minus 176 favorite against the plus 143 Sam Hughes. That makes sense. The minus 142 Herbert versus the plus 116 Rolando Bedoya. That makes sense as well. I agree. And then Sedriques Dumas is the minus 228 favorite against Denis Tiuliulin, who's plus 181. That makes sense as well. I think most of these odds are on point, except that main event is crazy, bro. How is Cory that big of an underdog? That makes absolutely no sense to me. Well, we'll get into that. So if you guys want to jump on these odds, whether it be a straight bet, a parlay, a lot of these odds do seem like they're quite accurate. You can go on matchup fighters that you think are going to win to multiply your earnings. Or you can live bet while the fights are going on. You can see how it's playing out a bit before you go and bet on it. And my bookie's giving you a first deposit bonus. Well, they'll match up your first deposit all the way up to $1,000. So if you put in like $50, they'll give you another $50 to play with. And all you gotta do is use the promo code Weasel to activate this offer. That's promo code WEASLE to take advantage of my bookie sign up offer. Remember to visit mybookie.ag today where you can win big. It will come with a rollover withdrawal requirement. And with that, let's go right to our first featured fight. Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chiesa. Please, Tony, don't make Chiesa give you the 8th loss in a row. This isn't the welterweight division, meaning Tony's going up. He is generally more powerful there, but he's had one fight at welterweight in many, many years, and that was against Nate Diaz, where he didn't look that great. So he's gonna get destroyed. But Tony gave us a bit more information about his training. He said he sparred 120 rounds to prepare for this fight against Michael Chiesa. What that means is Tony's never been washed up. No, he was just holding himself back this entire time. 2025, Tony Ferguson becomes the welterweight champion. We're calling it here. Please, Tony, don't get destroyed. Michael Chiesa is about to take him down and just choke him out within like a round. Yeah, so I'm definitely going with Michael Chiesa in this fight. Tony's just a shadow of a shell of his former self. So much slower than ever before, doesn't take a shot like he used to. He's gonna be smaller and physically weaker than Chiesa. I'm expecting Chiesa to take him to the ground and submit him quite swiftly. And hopefully, if Tony loses that fast, or if he loses at all against Chiesa, he retires. And then we go to Marlon Vera versus Deiveson Figueiredo. This is going to be quite interesting. Both guys are good strikers. I would say Chito excels in that department compared to his grappling skills. He doesn't have great takedown defense as shown against Cory Sandhagen, but he is a pot shotter looking for the perfect moment to land his big strikes. And oftentimes, against the best fighters in the world, that timing doesn't really come for him to land those kicks and big hooks and stuff like that. The guy has insane power, but really doesn't let his hands go enough for it to work efficiently. He's way too passive in the first round, way too slow of a starter, fights at a slow pace, and I think that's going to hurt him against someone like Deiveson. Now, crazy enough, Deiveson might be the bigger guy, even though he was a 125er. This guy used to cut from 165 pounds before, but lowered it for the flyweight division. I expect him to go heavier to cut down to 135, so maybe 165 pounds. Maybe he's back to that weight. But he's more of a well-rounded fighter than Chito Vera is. He's got good grappling, and in fact, at 135, he's using that way more than his striking, taking down his opponents like Rob Font and Cody Garbrandt, whereas before in the flyweight division, he was bulldozing these guys with his hands, just showing extreme power, knocking them out. And we were yet to see that on full display at 135. But I don't think we're going to see that against Chito, because Chito's got a chin made out of granite. The guy's like Wolverine out there. He recovers so fast. I mean, the knee that Sean O'Malley landed on him should have caused way more damage than it actually did. Not only in the fight, but even after it. Like a few days later, this guy looked like he didn't even fight at all after all that damage from O'Malley. But here's the thing about Deiveson Figueiredo and why he's going to take down and smash Chito. Apparently, Figueiredo may have been training with Khabib and Umar to prepare for Chito Vera. If that's the case, Chito's gonna get taken down yet again and probably submitted at some point in that fight, because Figgy's got some great submissions, man. He's very, very good on the ground. But to go with that, the guy's excellent on the feet as well. So my prediction for this fight, I'm gonna go Deiveson Figueiredo to win by a 3rd round submission, rear naked choke. He's got the power to throw off Chito if he ever gets aggressive, landing some big shot like that. Deiveson has a lot of power in his hands. The only thing is, I don't like how much he's open to shots at times. So it's going to leave Chito to find maybe a head kick here or there that could drop Deiveson Figueiredo. Right? I would not be surprised at all if Chito actually catches him with a high kick and puts him down. And then we finally go to the main event. Cory Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. Umar could come out there and just dominate Cory Sandhagen, because stylistically, Umar's wrestling should be a very big problem for Cory. He got out-wrestled by an older and injured TJ Dillashaw, whereas Umar is bigger than TJ. He has a different wrestling style that is something that Cory's not used to going up against. But the thing is, even after that TJ fight, Cory got way better as a fighter, both in his wrestling and his striking. He's way more intelligent than ever before. And he has the ultimate weapon against the takedown, right? He's got that flying knee, the most destructive weapon against wrestlers, but he's got to time that correctly, because if he misses the flying knee, he's going to get taken down and probably dominated on top. Because Cory does something similar to like Leon Edwards, for an example. He will give up his back and stand up. And it's not going to fly against Umar. Umar's going to get his back, or he's going to break him down, throw in the Dagestani handcuff, control him, and start landing ground and pound shots. And here's the thing, if Song Yadong can take him down like that, if Rob Font can get a takedown on him, if an older injured TJ Dillashaw can take him down like that, I'm pretty sure Umar could do the same. So stylistically, I do favor what Umar can do. But the thing is, Cory's a better striker overall. In almost every facet, he's a better kicker, he's a better puncher, better with angles, better with combinations, he has better footwork, longer and taller, more athletic, higher IQ as a striker. But the only thing is, his entire approach to the fight can be completely destroyed just because of the wrestling from Umar. And the fact that he's relatively safer than some of the other guys Cory has fought in the stand-up, right? A lot of the guys that Cory has fought are bigger risk takers in the striking than Umar is. Now, that doesn't mean that Umar can't get caught. I mean, Beksat literally hurt this guy, but he's not going to give as many openings being aggressive as like Song Yadong will, or TJ Dillashaw, or Frankie, or Rob Font. So I think the biggest thing about Cory is going to be the angles. If he could find the angle and get Umar to follow him so he can land like a flying knee or some kind of uppercut or something like that, you know? That's going to be the biggest thing for Cory Sandhagen. It's all the angles and the footwork. He doesn't want to be too close because Umar will shoot on his legs. He wants to be a bit farther away, probably like mid-kicking distance, and sit there. But instead of throwing the body and leg kicks, I think he should fake those instead. But his head kicks should be the committed ones. The rest of the kicks should all be feints. Get Umar to start reacting low and from angles, and that's going to open up the head strikes for Cory Sandhagen. Now on Umar's side, feints are going to be big for him as well, like feint up top to open up the legs, feint the takedown to open up punches up to the head. He could throw the leg kicks and stuff like that as well, but he's going to have to expect Cory to retaliate on those kind of angles with risky techniques like those flying knees, like spinning kicks to the head and stuff like that, because Cory's probably not going to want to stay in the boxing range for too long because he knows that Umar is eventually going to shoot. And Umar has to also expect that as well. So if Cory does get in close, he might throw some hands, maybe a two-punch combination, but then he's going to be taking off for the flying knee to finish off the combination. But ultimately, my prediction for this fight, I'm going to go with Cory Sandhagen. I'm going with his experience. I'm going with the fact that he knows that pretty much the only way Umar is going to win is through his wrestling. If Umar strikes with Cory for too long, he's probably going to get knocked out. So Umar is going to want to shoot and take down, stay in that distance, move back and forth, be safe from that range until he can find the opening for his takedowns. And I think Cory's going to revolve his entire game plan around stuff like that. I think Umar could be susceptible to the flying knee. I think the jab from Cory is going to be an excellent weapon just to be safe from distance, as well as keep checking Umar, keeping him honest at all times, and throw a lot of feints his way to get him to react to set up a potential head kick. So I'm going to go with Cory Sandhagen here, being the first fighter to defeat Umar Nurmagomedov, and I'm picking him by a 4th round TKO. So I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions, and if you did, make sure to give this video a like, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video.